Hello and welcome. So this is how I knit my entire Christmas jumper, which I'm currently wearing, in about 40 hours. Now, disclaimer, obviously I did not knit it, sat down to finish in 40 hours, or I think my hands would have actually fallen off. But it took me just under 4 weeks, and based on the time it took me to do a certain number of stitches in each row, I worked it out as about 40 hours of knitting, which is pretty insane considering it is like all colour work on 3.5mm needles, but we'll get into that. So, good place to start is the start. I haven't knit myself a Christmas jumper before. I always tend to do something around Christmas that's like a little treat to myself, a little Christmas present to myself. Last year I did a lot more gift knitting. This year I kind of said that I wasn't going to do that. So I decided I would gift knit myself a lovely jumper, and as soon as I saw the sneak peeks for the Northern Augustins number 7, I absolutely died and just was like, I need this jumper in my wardrobe now. So once it came out, I got to work with buying the pattern and doing some maths. So if you see me looking down, it's because I literally have all of my equations and maths. So essentially, obviously I'm not going to give away anything in the pattern, this is just numbers of rounds and stuff. So yeah, I basically split it up into the width of the body, like the one front panel is essentially the same width as one front panel of the sleeves, but obviously it's all knit in the round and it's like a circular yoke. So I essentially worked out that like it's split into 4 big panels, so the front, the back and each sleeve is like the same amount of knitting, if that makes sense. Like if I were to make the front panel twice, I could use the second one as a sleeve. I don't know if that's making sense, but it makes sense to me. So essentially I worked out that the body from the neck to the ribbing at the bottom is 197 rounds for my size, because there's certain like adjustments that you make in the chart to match like your body length, and you know, it's very customizable, which I really liked. And so yeah, essentially it's like 197 stitches from the top to the bottom, and then for 2 sleeves it's 266 rounds, or 133 for each sleeve. So a lot of knitting indeed, but obviously the round of the body is double the size of the round of the sleeve. So in total it was 463 rounds, and I had told myself that I wanted this finished latest Christmas Eve. And as you can tell, it's not Christmas Eve when I'm filming this, and I have got the jumper on, so I absolutely smashed that, which I'm really happy with because it means I get some more wear out of it this year. But I wanted to give myself enough time because it is also my final year at university, so I didn't want to be like slacking and then have too much like time pressure and deadlines. So essentially I worked out that when I started the pattern, I had 6 weeks to Christmas Eve, bang on the day. So I divided 463 by 6, which equated to 77 rounds a week, or 11 rounds a day. Now that did not take into account the difference between like the size of the neck versus the size of the sleeves versus the size of the body. So that was a rough estimate of like how I was going to track things. And then essentially I worked out that it took a couple of days to do the neck, and you know, obviously a couple of days that I was going to give myself for blocking and washing. So I think it was like 10 days to do half of the body, 10 days to do the second half of the body, and then 10 days for each sleeve. And again, I did surpass that, which is really good. But yeah, all of the details of how I broke down my like goals and targets is on my Ravelry. But I thought I'd really quickly go through that at the start because I don't know, I really like having a goal that I can work towards, because sometimes it ends up just feeling like the endless like stockinette or something. And obviously this is really engaging because it's colour work, but I think sometimes I've done projects in the past where like it's taken me longer than it should have because it felt like I was making no progress when I was. So I think it's really nice being able to work out where you are. And like I literally was on a run with one of my friends today, and we were talking about how like on the run in your mind, like you work out the maths of like, okay, I've done 2.64k, like that means I've got to do that like another 3 times, and that hits me to 10, or like, you know, less than 3 times or whatever. You work out all of the little maths to see how far in you are, and it just helps keep you pushing along. And in a funny way, I feel like it is the same with knitting. Like knitting is a marathon, not a sprint, unless you're on the game of wool, but no comment. And so I feel like it does take a long time, and sometimes it can be quite disheartening if you feel like you're making no progress and you're sitting down every night and like taking some time out to do it and it just feels like it's not happening. But yeah, and then after I'd worked out all of those maths, split everything up, I then sat down and timed how long it took me to do one round. And bearing in mind there are 463, obviously that 463 is not equal because of the like number of stitches and the distribution, but for one round of the body it took 10 minutes. So for each sleeve, which is 133, it took me around 6 minutes because it was a little bit more fiddly, because I do I always do sleeves in magic loop, which I personally prefer, like in terms of experience. Like I like the experience of knitting magic loop sleeves, but obviously it does take a little bit more time to like push everything through and everything. So yeah, I sat down and did some more maths and worked out that it took me about 40 hours of my time to knit this jumper, and in 4 weeks, which means that I spent 10 hours a week, which is like quite a lot of knitting, I guess. But yeah, it's something that I absolutely love to do to relax, and it was also like a nice time goal that I had for myself, like feel that sense of achievement. I think especially in exam season, and especially with pieces of coursework and deadlines, you often don't get the satisfaction of getting your grade back very quickly, and you can put all of this effort in, and the submission itself for me is not enough to make me feel like super positive and happy. Like when I get the feedback and I see a grade that I like, or like something I've been working on, some good feedback, that's what gives me that like dopamine hit. And so I feel like sometimes when you're endlessly kind of working and getting no like positives back, it's really nice to have an achievement in your personal kind of goals, that means that you can feel good about yourself. And like every week I could see in my tracker that I was like very ahead, and I was like, I'm gonna finish like at least 10 days before Christmas Eve, which I have. And so it was really, really nice having that to kind of positively motivate me. And I'd also sit and, you know, I'd be like, okay, 2 hours of work, half an hour of knitting, and like, you know, 8 p.m. I always clock off from studying because I feel like it can be all consuming and you can just keep going. But as soon as you do that, you jeopardize your sleep for the next day, and then you're more tired and it takes longer to get up and going. So after 8 p.m, that is my like cut off, and I sit down and watch some really trashy TV like Below Deck or something, and I sit and take that time to knit, which just soothes me so much, which I'm sure is the same for so many people. And I think another thing that's really nice is that in that 40 hours I go to I found like a couple of new social stitches in Bath, which is really nice. Obviously one held by the uni, and then there's also a lovely yarn shop in town which hosts one, and so it's quite nice that like I can see like, oh, I spent 6 hours like at this social stitch with these lovely people, and that is, you know, like a big chunk of the time that I spent with them, and, you know, kind of getting through it, and, you know, I spent this much time doing it this way, and all of that. It's quite nice to like look back at that time and see. And I think I've said this before, but like I love when I always have multiple things on the go, but when you have one thing you can really like sit and lock into, it really like signifies a certain time for me. And like I remember exactly what life was like at the time that I was making something, because it's like so many snapshots of that era of your life. And like the Belle and Sebastian pullover is one which I just so vividly remember, like sitting in bed and like, or like being on the sofa with my boyfriend, or like all of these little memories that come out, and I remember having it in my bag, and I just, every time I wear it I hold those memories. And I feel like this jumper is definitely going to be one of those where like it's kind of a little time capsule, whereas others, like long-term projects, they're spread over such a long time where I've just procrastinated it that it signifies it less. But yeah, without further ado, I mean, I might do a little stand up and like swivel around so you can see the jumper. So as I mentioned before, the pattern is Northern Augustins number 9. It's her most recent like Christmas release. She always does a Christmassy jumper around this time of year, and it's such a nice way to just signify the end of the year and like give yourself a little treat, which I feel like it's easy to get so many things and like knit for other people and be very generous as knitters, but it's really nice to also treat yourself. And so it was really, as soon as she came out with it and I saw the promo photos, I was just sold. And I think it's really nice because I loved the kind of like scallop yoke with the big bows, but I feel like the bows are like very trendy, and even in this jumper like they're quite prominent, and it really worried me that because they're so trendy it was going to be like not chuggy, I think that's too strong a word, but maybe like I don't know, just like a bit overdone. And I want this to be a very timeless piece, but I think it's like because they're a little bit smaller and it's blended in with so much more of the colour work, I feel that it's less of the time, which I really liked. And I also like, I know that there's quite long floats in that yoke, and it's really pretty, but I think it's just like not my style as much as this one was. And I was already kind of looking at some of her Christmas jumpers, and then I saw this, like the photos of this, and I was like, oh my goodness, that is a bit of me, like that is amazing. So bought the pattern, day it released, looked through everything. I am on a student budget, so I had to knit with Drops Lima, which I actually had a really good experience knitting with. The balls, like there's a decent amount of yardage, it's like 110 meters maybe or something, so there was quite a lot of like changing out, but that didn't bother me so much. The blend I believe is just like wool and alpaca. There's definitely like a very subtle halo, which is really nice because I think it should, fingers crossed, help prevent pilling. I have tried to look through like Ravelry and like Reddit to see how this yarn wears and how it blocks, and I'm sure there are loads of videos out there where they mention it, but I've not come across anything yet about what it's like when it wears. But so far I've taken it around with me in my bags everywhere. I have been sat on the sofa and rolled it around, and I've washed it and blocked it. I was really scared of felting it when I was washing it. I did hand wash it in cold water with wool wash, as you're supposed to do, but I've heard that people have had issues with it felting. That was like the one thing that I heard, so I was really cautious about that, and it worked out really well. Like there's no lack of like stitch definition or anything, like it all feels really nice. But I have not had any or heard any information on how it wears or how it pills, so I'm hoping the halo kind of protects it a little bit, the alpaca. But either way, it seems like quite a sturdy piece, and it's not going to be something I'm wearing for the entire year. It doesn't get that cold in the UK for most of the year, so I feel like I should be pretty safe if I wear it a couple of times, you know, a few times over the Christmas and winter period, and then I can just depill it before the start of the next season. Like I think it should be fine. But if you've had any experiences with the Drops Lima, good or bad, please comment down below, because I'm interested to hear how it wears over time. I think that's the thing I'm like, how does it wear? Does it like pill super easy, like under the armpits? Like what is the experience? But either way, that is the yarn that I chose to knit with, and I feel like the density is such a good level where it's not like thick and stiff where you're feeling like you're a little bit trapped. Like it's still got like a good amount of drape, but in the same way it's not letting loads of air through, and I think that is probably like a side effect of the colour work. But either way, it works really fabulously for me. The alpaca softens the wool up for me. I find that sometimes if I just knit with pure wool and wear it bare on my skin, I get some sensitivity. So I feel like it's really soft. It's really like not an issue being on my neck and chest, which is usually like my problem area. And so yeah, I absolutely love wearing it so far. I'm so scared of like dropping any drinks or soup or anything on it, so I keep like kind of just like sitting back and being like, no, don't get near my jumper. But yeah, really overall so happy with it, and I highly recommend knitting this pattern, because I posted like a little video on TikTok of the finished piece, and I had so many comments saying, oh, I wanted to knit this but it's so intimidating. And I feel like when you look at it and you see it's like 3.5 millimeters, it feels really intimidating. Like, at least for me, I've knit colourwork and cables and lace and things before, but there was something about just, you know, like the sport weight 3.5s, like, oh, that's quite small. The smallest gauge I'd use to knit like a full garment is 4 millimeters, and even though it's just that 0.5, like it feels like a big difference. Like as soon as you see that 3, it's like, oh. But again, I didn't feel it was that different to working on 4s. There was obviously a bit of difference, like it wasn't completely unnoticeable, but I didn't think it was too fine that like it dragged or it felt like it was taking forever to make. Like it did feel like I was making good progress, and I think probably a part of that is because I was quite on it with like tracking it and timing, seeing how many rows I'd completed, so I can see like at this point that's 30% of the way through, like at this point we're 65% of the way through, like over halfway, you know. There's a lot of like motivation tactics that you can kind of use to get through it. But yeah, I absolutely love the finished garment. I highly recommend challenging yourself to knit something for Christmas, maybe next year. But yeah, this pattern was fantastic. If you like the look of it, if you think there are some cool colour combinations that you could choose, definitely treat yourself and make it, because it's nowhere near as intimidating as it looks. I think the longest float is like, I don't know, something like 10 stitches or something. Like it's quite easy to catch. It's not too tricky at all. And the charts were really easy to follow and modify. And honestly, the modification is something I love so much, because I always find that because I'm short, the yoke depth is really long. And then by the time I knit the sleeves, and they're like long when I'm stood up, when I put my arms forward, like with one of my other jumpers, this, you know, the sleeves come all the way back here because the yoke is so long, but as soon as I put my arms down, it's like almost down to my fingers. So it's one of those tricky things. So I liked that there was a lot of room for adjustment. So if you've got a really short, you know, kind of neck to armpit ratio like I have, you could kind of reduce that yoke depth and increase the body depth. And actually that is something I will mention. This is no offense to anyone who does like it, I really did not like the like doll motifs. I found it really creepy, and I was like, whoa, this does not feel the same as like the hearts and the ribbons, like cutesy girly, like the little like dolls kind of freaked me out a bit. They were quite like folklore-y. And so I had originally planned to knit the full chart as written, and then I was gonna add like this kind of like crisscross, almost like Fair Isle kind of like OXO motif inspired kind of thing. But then by the time I got to the end of the chart, it was actually long enough, so I didn't have to use the extra chart, which was nice. And the length works out really well. But yeah, I didn't really make any edits other than the customizable sections of the chart, which are already written in the pattern. So again, I think if you're new to colourwork knitting, it is probably quite a good one to do, because again, by the time you hit kind of past the bows and you're into the stripes, the longest like float is like maybe 3 or 5 stitches, which you don't even need to catch. So it's really, really easy. I'd say the one thing I didn't do, which is so annoying, I'm working on another project, which I will talk about after this. It's like a little bonus. But I didn't get the colour dominance right. I held the white as like the dominant colour or whatever. I don't know, I mixed it up somehow, and so it means that the white kind of pops out more than the red. Again, I don't think it's that noticeable, unless I wouldn't notice, and like it doesn't bother me enough that I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't touch that jumper. But I wish I'd had that knowledge when I started the jumper. And then, yeah, I'll talk about the next project in a second, but I was recommended a pattern for some colourwork mittens, and the first thing was about colour dominance and which way, because I hold both strands of yarn in my left hand. I'm a continental knitter, and I hold both strands in my left hand, and I kind of put one strand down through all of my fingers and one strand back between my like ring finger and my pinky to separate them, and I kind of just like knit that way because I find it is like fastest for me. And it was only after I'd read the pattern for the mittens that I saw which way round you should hold it, and I was like, oh damn, like that's so annoying. But you know, I don't think it's very noticeable. I think the effect is still fantastic, and I just think the construction, the design, everything was just 10 out of 10. So this is kind of a bonus for the video, but essentially I got given a vintage Dale of Norway, I don't know how you pronounce it, but basically a proper Norwegian jumper was bought by my auntie on Vinted for my uncle, and it had some like moth holes in it, and she fetched it to me and said, look, if you can't do it, we can go and get it professionally done, but could you fix the jumper? Because there were certain places where like it could have unravelled where the holes were. So I said I'd have a look at it, and it's my first time like fixing things, and honestly I'm really happy. There were holes in the neck, in the front and in the back. It's quite heavily pilled, like it's clearly like a very well loved jumper. There was also, if I can find it, like if you can see just here, there was like a hole there, and also in the ribbing in the front of the body, which is a little bit more noticeable, but it folds over so it doesn't matter too much, like just along here. So I've secured, the first thing I did was like secured everything to make sure that it wouldn't unravel any further. And I went to, so one of the social stitches is run by a yarn shop in Bath called A Yarn Story, and one of the workers very, very, very kindly took the time to walk around the shop and find a colour match. And honestly, like, I don't think you would notice, like, there are 4 holes which have been like sewn up in here and like duplicates stitched over, and I don't think you'd be able to tell. I think it's not like 100% perfect, but I'm really, really happy with the effect. And the jumper is so gorgeous, like it'd be such a waste for it to not be used. But yeah, I finished fixing it and I had some yarn left over, so I thought it would be nice to make some mittens in the colours to match. So I had some leftover white from my test knit for Florence, the Forget Me Not jumper, and I had got the navy yarn from A Yarn Story, and essentially I used a strand of Rosa Pomar Vovo and Isager spinni, and that just gave like the best colour and texture match, because the Vovo was a good colour match but a bit too smooth, so the spinni we kind of held with it to make it a little bit more grippy. And then I just got the Vovo in red as well, and I'll show you how it's looking so far. So it's still attached to all of the wool and everything. So this is, I believe they're called the Elsa mittens winter edition by Knitlidt, and this was a recommendation by Handmade by Florence because she is the queen of colourwork mittens, and I wanted like a DK colourwork mitten that would fit men and women, because I've used other patterns before where the biggest size has been quite narrow, and I also didn't want, a lot of the designs are very floral and it doesn't really fit their vibe as much. So I managed to find this pattern, and it's kind of these like snowflakes, and it's obviously got the little red, and I just thought it matches like the vibe of the jumper so well. And so this is going to be the pair for my uncle, because it's in the navy like base and then red and white on top. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing but with red as the base colour and navy dots, because my auntie wears like a lot of red with her skiing outfits, and they are going skiing in January. So I have a couple of weeks and time over Christmas to sit and finish these. And to be fair, this is like a night of knitting plus like an hour on my lunch break. So I think I can get through them quite quickly. I did make a bit of an oopsie in the thumb. I forgot to keep increasing because I just followed the chart and I forgot to increase. But it was only for a couple of rounds and they're quite big. I think my gauge is a little bit bigger. I think it's like one or two stitches bigger, but either way, this is the largest size and it feels really, really roomy on my hand. So I think it should be like a really good fit for my uncle, and it's matching up with the kind of size recommendations that they gave on the pattern. But yeah, I don't think it'll affect it too much. What I might do, I think I'm like 2 stitches below what I should have had for the thumb, so I might just pick up an extra stitch around the side, on either side, to make sure I've got like the right number, which I kind of like doing anyway because I feel like it closes up the holes between where you like pick the stitches up like that you've put on hold and then pick stitches up from the knitting, from like the cast on stitches. But I don't know, but either way, so far it looks really good on camera. I feel like every time I like knit colour work, I look at it in person, I'm like, oh, I don't know if that's looking good, and then as soon as I see it on camera it just looks amazing. Like, I don't know, I love how bold the stripes are, and I love like the colours. Like, there's something about the blue, red and white that it does just pop. It just looks so good and so wintry, and I could not be happier with how it matches the jumper because they're like so perfect. So I'm hoping they are going to be like the most envied mittened couple at the ski resort. So yeah, big win for that. And yeah, shout out to the workers at A Yarn Story for helping me find a match, and it was in a time crunch as well. I felt so bad. I kind of came in and I was like, I've got a train in an hour and I really need to get this before I go. And they absolutely smashed it. And yeah, I think in terms of colour match, it's pretty spot on. Texture is fantastic. And yeah, they're making up a perfect pair of mittens, which is very exciting. So that was my escapade into Christmas jumper knitting. It's been a pleasure knitting this. I highly recommend the pattern, and happy knitting.